Okay, my name's Hahhan. Thank you for coming today. A quick background on me. I'm probably 23-year media professional, I guess. I worked in television, mainly in Canada. I was educated in the UK, came to Canada in the late 80s. Been working in TV pretty much ever since. However, about 10 years ago, I also got my pilot's license, became very interested in aviation, and sort of always wanted to combine the two. Early on in my career, actually, I was a Westcam operator, which you may know of the Westcam. It's a Canadian invention. It's a gyro-stabilized camera platform that we would attach to helicopters, allowing us to get incredibly smooth shots, long-range shots. In fact, Westcam is now owned by L3, which is a very big American military operation now. It's based out in Burlington. It's turned out to be a very big operation. But most of my work was actually at the CBC and pretty much every production company in Toronto since. Done a lot of reporting for CBC News, some other organizations. I've turned out to be a producer, worked a lot in the even the reality genre, which seems to be a large part of the production market. However, I sort of, as everybody gets a little tired of reality TV, and especially the people working in it, as I learned about drone technology, about a year ago, I figured there was something very good for film production in drone technology, and decided to start a company called Avro Robotics to exploit it, to focus on media to start with, and then see where it goes after that. I do think there's a lot more uses, and as I've learned in the last year, tremendous lot of uses for this technology. So I've become active as trying to promote it for many good reasons. I know I've met Matthew online, wherever Matthew is, somewhere over there, and joined his cause for drone journalism, and I've tried to join as many other places and become active within the communities of people using this technology for good, as well as trying to run a business and trying to also exploit the technology for financial reasons. But I thought I'd start off, as I say, I'm not a professional speaker, so please forgive me, and I'm first time I've ever used this program, so it could not work, so bear with me as I muddle through this. So, as I say, I'm really here because I believe in our intrinsic value and desire to do good. I do think whatever we put our minds to, technology or otherwise, our instincts are to do good with things. And I want to tell you a story about how I first saw drones and what it meant to me. I was actually working in Afghanistan probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and we'd been doing an interview with a bricklayer, and we'd gone into his house, which was, to be honest with you, was just a shack. And we'd spent the afternoon with him, talking to him, learning about his life, what he did. He'd come from Iran. He had fled when the Taliban took over and come back. He'd just returned from Iran, where he'd been a refugee, and was trying to make his life there again. And we talked to him a long time. And he worked 7 days a week. I mean, he was working nonstop, and in the evenings, which there wasn't much left time, he would go to a local school to help build the school, because he believed in education for girls, and he was very adamant that he felt that the girls needed to have an education. And I was struck at the time. He talked about how we had to go and fetch water and carry up hills. It was a hard life, but his desire to do good was amazing. And I think that really struck me when I left that interview, that human beings want to do good and they want to help. And I remember, hopefully this works, I remember leaving his house, and we looked up, and the kids, as they would always follow us around there, they would come out and they would come charging after us and follow us around. And they were all pointing up at the sky, and they were pointing at an aircraft. And I looked up and saw my actual first drone. It was I don't think it was that actual model. It was just one I pulled off the internet, but it was something similar. It was a US military drone. It wasn't too high. It was climbing out, going on a mission. And I remember thinking at the time, and it was a passing thought because I was very busy doing other things, but Wouldn't it be good if these unmanned aircraft could be dropping food, could be dropping water, could be dropping supplies, maybe rather than missiles? And it was sort of that thought, I guess, that sort of led me to where I am today. In the sense, I found myself now working with drones, albeit smaller size and in a slightly different way. But using this technology for good and seeing it do there was transformative for me. I really felt that there is a lot of things that could be done with these systems. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, obviously, what we generally think the public perception is. I mean, you know as well as everybody, it's not, the word drone conjures up a negative connotation, there's no doubt. You know, what we see is media coverage and the thought that there's pilots driving through the Los Angeles and Las Vegas countryside going to work to go and fire missiles at people in Pakistan. And that's undoubtedly true. That does happen, and the drones are a very effective military tool. There's no doubt about it. But nowadays what we found is that the technology that they had even 5 years ago when I was watching the drones in Afghanistan to what we have now is not dissimilar. The technology's evolved very quickly into systems such as I have here, where we're using something very similar to what the military were using. And in this situation, we now have an explosion of a domestic drone market. Estimates put it around about 30,000, and I think it's probably higher than that. I think 3D Robotics talk about selling 10,000 drones a year, and they're just one of the manufacturers. So the explosion of market of drones is really unprecedented. And they come in all shapes and sizes. What we've got here is what they call either quadcopters, hexcopters, octocopters even, and of course fixed-wing drones, like Matthew has, I think, in the other room. So what we're looking at for this kind of technology, instead of costing $15 million for Predator stuff, you're basically looking like a $400 or $500 system to give you extremely sophisticated flight characteristics. So something like this here is probably costs a little bit more than $300 or $400, but you're probably still looking about $6,000 or $7,000 for an extremely sophisticated flight operations systems in there. I'll get to a little bit more about what they're about later, but what it does is fly in a way that we haven't been able to before. A lot of people look at these things and think, well, you know, are they RC helicopters? They do come from that. I mean, there's a lot of crossover between what we had in remote control. In fact, Matthew's plane looks like a remote control. In fact, he told me it is a remote control plane. What he's done and what we found is we can take the remote control plane technology and add these very, very sophisticated controllers inside. And these controllers can cost as little as $200. So from that, you take your RC controller, you throw it into here, you have a very, very powerful flying machine that doesn't take a massive amount of skill. These, as a sideline, of course, as I say here, these gyroscopes and all the other technology actually came from the cell phone market, something that kind of crosses over into the privacy issue, but it was those gyroscopic chipsets that you find in your cell phone made their way into this sort of miniature technology. And this is the gyroscopes allow the quadcopters and aircraft to now fly knowing where they're level, knowing where they're up and down. It allows them to have a lot of control that way. So that's where it started. The company Parrot, probably about 4 years ago, maybe, not that long. I think, again, we have a Parrot drone here, was the first to commercially market it. And I think I have a video to show you a little bit of how exciting it seemed to be. This is the AR drone. So that was the promo video for AR drone. You can't underestimate the effect that the AR drone has had on the market. It was, you can buy them for about $300 at Best Buy, in that range. They control through your iPad or your iPhone. They stream live video straight into your iPad and iPhone. They're a one-touch takeoff, I think one-touch landing. You can fly it simply by pushing and pulling and twisting your iPhone so that it's very direct feedback, or you can fly it with just buttons. The AR drone has sold tens of thousands around the world. You'll probably see kids around with it. You'll see adults around with it. It really was one of the first systems to be really adopted. And it was the first one that people said, okay, we may have some issues with this, we may not. It's not a very, it hasn't really caused any problems to anybody as far as, you know, there's been no real crashes. It's very lightweight, it's very small. There's been no serious misuse of it that I know of. Matthew may know more, I don't know. But I don't think there's been none to my knowledge. But it's been had a very large impact. The Parrot company based in France has bought another fixed-wing company and will be launching a equally simple to fly, equally more powerful fixed-wing version of a Parrot system coming up. So this company, it's really focused on not really kind of professional operations, but it's focused on the fun side of things. But trust me, Parrot is a force to be reckoned with out there. They've really made a big inroads into getting these drones and these things adopted. So I'd like to maybe talk a little bit now, rather than just the introduction to the systems, what I see as some of the areas where drones are being used for good. And there's many, many areas. I really could probably talk for hours and hours and hours on that, and I don't want to. So, and you probably don't want me to either. So I'm going to talk on just a few areas that I think are probably some of the more interesting areas, some of the things I think we can learn from where the drones are going. For example, I started this business to focus on media usage. I use this to film for TV productions. Production companies. It's interesting, it's my background. I have all the contacts there. I can make this, I think, from a business side work. We're learning, everybody's learning about how these things operate. I'll give you a quick overview of some of the parameters that we work with. It's Transport Canada regulated, so anything that is done as a commercial operation becomes under something, some Transport Canada regulations, and up to that point, RC, if you're flying your AR drone for fun, go crazy. You can fly it wherever you want. There's no regulations really on that. If you fly it and get paid for it, or for gain, the regulations here in Canada become very, very detailed, and we submit a 20-page document every time we fly for a commercial operation. So it's not a light, you know, it's not something we can just go up and fly the next day or the day after. At this point, it's a very, very regulated business, and that will play into all the aspects of drones for good. It affects everything. The regulations here in Canada and around the world, I suspect they're not too different. I know some of the regulations out there really are both holding us back and probably keeping us safe. So it's that side I think will be a very interesting discussion. So one area I'm going to talk on, and this comes from my background that I think I'd like to talk about first, is some of the good areas. I'm going to talk about journalism. And I know Matthew also addressed some of this, but I'm going to beat him to it in some regards. So hopefully you'll have some new things to say after I've talked about it. So as we see the state start to use this technology, we're all aware, I think there's in Canada here, Halton Regional Police are operating drones. The RCMP now have drones. I thought it was very important when the state starts to run systems like this and operate systems like this, that journalists also have access to the same tools. I think it's a very important fact that any society should have the journalists out there with the same tools, with the same ability to monitor and check and fact check that the state would have. So I've been an advocate for that, and I strongly support, and I've met many broadcasters, and I've gone to meetings with broadcasters, news agencies, who are all very, very interested in using this technology. The only thing that's holding them back here is the regulatory body that requires us to file a flight plan 21 days before operations. So with 21 days, you can imagine there's a train crash, there's a flood, there's something newsworthy gone on. It's not going to work for them. They want to use it. In fact, I started with the Toronto Star. This is a very typical story. A year ago, the Toronto Star actually bought a drone, thought it'd be great. They'd use it for some great aerial stuff. We went out, we started doing a story. I was on the Canadian Open at the time, and we went out and filmed and shot some stuff. Somewhat unsuccessfully. The drone didn't fly very well, but we got some material. And of course, when we got back and everybody started looking at what we could do legally, we found out that we couldn't actually put any of this stuff on the web. We weren't approved by Transport Canada to do the flights. We weren't approved. And it wasn't out of malice. It was simply we didn't know. We didn't understand the full regulations. And at that point, the Star and many other news organizations are not the only one who put their drone on the side, and they're all sticking on shelves, gathering dust, because they can't operate them in the way that they need to. There is a way. Sorry?
Is that because it's a commercial enterprise?
Yeah.
Or would a blogger who isn't running a commercial enterprise be able to do it?
Well, yes, it's because it's a commercial enterprise. A blogger, the actual specific language, and I'll just quickly address that, the specific language that Transport Canada says you cannot do it for monetary gain and or gain. They leave it's written by lawyers, so gain is up to them to interpret. If they see it's promoting your blogging site, that may be seen for gain. It's open to interpretation, and that's the way the language is written. So they have the ability to say, you can't use that. That would be seen for gain. You need to apply for an SFOC, a Special Operations Flight Certificate. So I'll tell a story about that actually near the end. So as I say, as a state, and I think it's important that the journalists have these kind of technology. So journalism is a very important part, I think, of drones for good. And there has been some good stories told with drones so far, and I'm going to pick on probably the two of the most well-known ones. The first was from an RC aircraft. I think it was in Texas. He was flying his RC aircraft. This gentleman was flying around. I don't think he was out there deliberately to do any kind of journalistic work, but he ended up taking some pictures of a river, and I think we have a picture up there of the river. And it found that it was actually full of blood, and turned out that a local slaughterhouse was dumping blood into this river as an environmental story. And he took the pictures down, he took it to the environmental agency. I think he ended up prosecuting the company that did that and the slaughterhouse that did it. And so that was probably the first example that we know of, I think, of journalism being used or drones being used to break stories, to actually do an environmental story and resulting in a successful prosecution. It wasn't done as I don't think it's to say the guy was out there saying, I'm a journalist, I'm going to break a story. He just ended up using a model plane with a camera on it and taking pictures. And that's where it started. And that was probably about a year ago, I suspect, maybe a little bit longer. Matthew might know more about the story. I think you've covered it a couple of times. But I think what's important is to remember that this is such a new technology. All this stuff is happening, and you guys are exactly the right time to discuss this, because this technology is happening now and changing by the hour. Trust me, there are factories in China right now coming up with something that we haven't even thought of for this. And this is an important story to understand, is that just by flying a remote control plane, getting aerial shots, it revealed things that you couldn't see from the ground. And it revealed things that we just couldn't kind of get our heads around from a certain low angle perspective. From the air, you could see something more. I'm going to show another video here. And this is one very recently from the protest in Turkey. A guy was flying a DJI Phantom quadcopter with a camera on board. This is a $700 drone. You can get it at most hobby shops now. And that's what it looks like. It's small, it's white. I have one myself. It's fun to fly. And he has a camera on it. And he was flying it around Taskim Square. And Matthew's done a fantastic interview with the actual pilot of this. It's a long video, so I'm going to skip. Oh, that's what happened to it, by the way. It got shot down. The police actually shot it down. It's an amazing shot that, and this is the footage that he did. And so this is formative drone journalism, in my opinion. I think it's a really important piece of video. It was taken while the protests were going on. He was flying around. And again, Matthew, I think, actually spoke to him in detail, so I'll let him talk to him more about specifically the reasons he was being there for. But the important thing is that you get an aerial perspective. You get telling the story this way, I think, is unprecedented. I saw the pictures from the ground. I actually knew quite a few of the journalists on the ground who were filming it, and none of them gave me this perspective. None of them gave me the understanding of what was going on there that I saw from this particular footage. And I know as a news organization, it's not the most stable. You know, it's not, you know, it's not beautiful and stable like we would get from our platforms. But from a news organization, that doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. It's about seeing the image and seeing that data and seeing that information as it goes, as things go on. And near the end, I think we can look at them. You can see the water cannons at work. And you have to excuse me if I just skip ahead. Hopefully, we can see some more footage. But what happened, as you saw right at the beginning, the police shot this down. First victory for the state over the drone journalists, I guess. But the bottom line is this footage is actually out there. And you'll see, I think, some incredible shots. It's taken with a $600 drone system. And so you'll see the police, the riot police, the water cannons at work. This is formative. This is the start of something. This is a technology I want to get into journalists' hands and say, here you go out, go crazy. But, of course, we have the regulations. That's what we're trying to figure out how to change. I'm not sure actually what the regulations in Turkey, but I'm sure it's probably as difficult to shoot like this kind of stuff and illegal as it would be here. This wouldn't be a legal thing to do in Canada. But I think it's important that we figure out a way of making it legal. So that's an important aspect. So journalism, I'm going to talk about another great use for this technology, maybe not as dramatic, but I think equally as important, is agriculture. Drones are being used for farm use. This is actually one area where I think it'll be a lot easier in the regulatory side of things to get things passed and through, because you're really over farm fields, you're not over people, you're not over buildings. The regulators have a much less problem with these. And although it's easy to think of farmers, you know, kind of Farmer Joe and his nice family farm, what we're really talking about with this technology is the multi-million acre kind of farm, where you have, you know, 50 square mile farms, 100 square mile farms. Pretty typical, I would think, in Australia and definitely here in Canada, where super farms become the norm. And so working with UAVs in farmland turns out to be an extremely effective tool for crop management. These farms are they're used for surveys. There's times when you're dealing with like literally 50 or 60 square miles, it's almost impossible to be able to monitor farm and crop growth, water usage. So by sending a drone over on a daily basis, you can actually take pictures, monitor, take that data into farm and agricultural software, and use it to monitor how the crops are doing. It allows, from my understanding, and I'm not an agriculture expert, it certainly allows a lot of crop modeling to be done with software. They take infrared pictures. They can actually see water usage inside these crops, so they can actually take and actually see where the water is inside the grapes. For example, I believe in Vancouver, where the grape growers are on the side of mountains, where it's actually difficult to get to, they can actually take FLIR cameras, the infrared cameras, and actually monitor the water content of grapes using that. So for a farmer, that information is very, very useful. Up to this point, he's been either stuck with full-size aircraft passovers Just so you know, like even a Cessna is burning 9 gallons of fuel an hour. So if you figure out that that's, you know, how many hours of fuel would that be compared to a battery-operated drone that's really using essentially electric power. It's environmentally a lot more effective. One area that I found quite interesting, partly because recently, as you know, in Toronto, we had a spraying of local trees downtown for various bugs. One issue that I think this will see is we'll see these remote crop sprayers starting to come up. It's UAV technology. It's bigger than this kind of technology simply because you've got to carry weight. But I'd like to show you a news story that I came across, and I think it's very interesting. Oh, that's Farmer Joe. He's actually a real farmer in the U.S. who actually uses his drone to take aerial photographs of his work.
By the federal government, unmanned drones are now buzzing over Yolo County, and the weapons they use can help farmers grow better crops.
Flying just several feet above crops in Yolo County is the Yamaha R-Max remote-controlled helicopter, an unmanned drone.
Very specific, very targeted, very precise.
No, not targeting suspected Al-Qaeda insurgents or enemy bunkers, but pesky crop-eating bugs.
It's surprisingly easy to operate.
UC Davis professor Kent Giles is an ag engineer. He says this chopper, weighing 200 pounds and about half the size of a golf cart, is used specifically for crops and will never fly over neighborhoods. They have to notify the FAA before even taking off. His team is looking for ways to help farmers spray and save.
This is an example of a sprayer that the helicopter might replace.
He says the traditional ground or aircraft crop sprayers use more chemicals than necessary.
With the aircraft, we can treat 3 or 4 acres in much less volume, maybe a 100th the volume that this would take.
And most ground sprayers can't negotiate tough terrain.
Sloping ground, a place that might be difficult to access otherwise.
The wine industry may be interested.
Grapes in Sonoma, Napa areas where you have hillside applications, very steep hillside, times when we don't have access by ground.
This drone can offer 2 invaluable benefits: safety and efficiency.
We think ultimately it removes an operator from being exposed to a chemical, and it also allows that chemical to be placed exactly where we want it in just the areas that we need it without having to treat the whole field.
You know, Ken also tells CBS 13 that drones are already being commercially used by about 2,500 operators in Japan.
Okay, I thought that was a great story. I thought that the technology, it is a Japanese helicopter. None of them being used here that I know of yet, but I do think we will see that particular model and that particular helicopter being used for crop spraying. And it makes a lot of sense. If you've ever flown an aircraft low, up 50 feet, you know there's a risk both for the pilot and for the people on the ground. And I think bottom line is, drones will make people's lives safer. They will simply make people's lives safer. People who are flying aircraft, crop sprayers, you simply won't have to be flying 50 feet above the ground. So I think drones in that level, another important point is just how safe they will make it for people taking dangerous flying operations. I want to talk also another drones for good example. There are so many that I just picked 3 or 4 that I thought was kind of worth discussing. Conservation, another area that drone technology is, again, I keep using the metaphor, but taking off. And this has been a really rapid adoption in this area, partly because a lot of conservation groups are small, don't have a lot of money, and so they will use whatever new technology they can get their hands on to make their point. Often they see themselves in battle with big corporations and big organizations and big business. So a lot of conservation groups have taken this technology and found it the ideal tool. They found what it's really allowed them to do is do aerial survey, aerial mapping, and follow people doing as far as they can see illegal things. And there are many sites on the web now that you will see devoted to drone conservation. And using drones makes a lot of sense. Again, environmentally, there's no fuel burn as we would be with a traditional aircraft. It's a lot cheaper to use than a traditional aircraft. And to be honest with you, because a lot of the conservation places are either out in the middle of nowhere, essentially, you know, jungles, or in the savannah in Africa, or in other places like that, or even in the UK, as we'll see, the regulations are a little looser. And so it's been a great place for them to experiment and to try this technology out and see if it works for them. I'm actually part of a group right now, and we're looking at mounting a gimbal, camera-based gimbal on a drone for rhino surveying. So we're going to try and hold poachers to account using this FLIR technology, and hopefully it's going to work. We're at the formative stages of that. I can't talk too much about it, but there are lots of other people trying the same thing. So this is I'm going to show another video, again, because I'm not a natural talker. I hope you'll see that by now. I'm going to show another video of a conservation group. It's a bit long. I'll probably skip parts of it, but it gives you an idea of some of the things that are going on. This is a group they're based. I'll tell you in a second. So we'll watch a bit of the video. This is only a year old, I have to say, and this is the technology that they're using. And I'll feel the ads. I think this was a $200 aircraft fitted with a $200 autopilot. And their main goal was to, I believe, monitor orangutan nests. I think it's in the Philippines. So they made this video just to promote what they're doing. So this plane's flying by autopilot. It's not being flown by remote control. What they do is they program the autopilot using a laptop. Instead of set route, press go. The aircraft goes to set altitude, and it will take pictures as it's going. In this case, it's taking video, but it can take pictures geotagged to the location. So here they are flying over the forest, starting to monitor things. It's all very cute. So they mentioned 3 or 4 other areas that they're looking at. And again, the regulations here are very loose. There's no regulations that we know of in this country that would stop them doing this stuff. They managed other areas. Another fine use of drone technology, forest fire monitoring, why not? You send it up there, smoke. Quick, fast deployment. Again, understand this is done a year ago. This is literally done with a $200 plane and a $200 autopilot. And this would have cost, I believe they talk about, I have a number here that was interesting. To monitor the gorillas, I think they talk about $250,000 to monitor some of the gorillas and orangutans. Essentially, this allows them to do it, replace that $200,000 program with a very fast visual aerial survey, where they could do on a daily basis to monitor the gorillas. It's hard to argue that this isn't a very, very powerful tool. It's hard to say that that's anything other than a very, very compelling reason to use this technology. So, as you can see, the way that...
Turn the volume down and then we'll hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry. I'll turn it down. If I can actually figure out how to turn it down. Oh, there it is. I think it's just mute and unmute on this particular thing. Yeah, so I can turn the sound off. You know what? Because on this particular...
Hold on, over here.
Is there a volume somewhere there?
You can use the mic. Sorry.
Let's try this. Let's start it up again.
Okay. That's better. There we go. I should know this working in the media. What I was saying is, again, they were talking about that to survey the gorilla and orangutan population was about $250,000 a year operation that they were trying to replace with this essentially $500 drone system. I'm waiting to see it. I mean, it's sort of, it seems like incredible things, but essentially that's what we're talking about for this kind of technology. This gives an example of what they do. There's just a couple of guys who decided to try this out. They bought this, let's say, $200 drone online and put in the autopilot and flew it. Allowed them to take geotag pictures of the gorillas and the orangutan populations. That's very important data for them, very, very important data. And the only other way to do it was full-size aircraft, and that was very expensive. And again, fuel burn and all the other fossil fuels that go along with that. So I've got another video. I don't know how much longer I want to go on, but I wanted to show you, this is again, partly because it's from my home country, is a group that's anti-blood sports. And the time to this little piece.
We don't like the term drones. It leads one to think of an automaton, something that's...
I don't know if you can hear this now.
It shouldn't be doing. The reality is, for us, a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle, is a platform to carry a camera to be able to see what we're looking for.
This is a fox hunt in the UK. And the point of this group was to use a drone to try and track the hunters.
Sometimes it is quite difficult to say in a fox hunt, show the fox in front, the hounds clearly after the fox, and then the huntsman following, on foot, on their horses. So you can get that, but these drones may very well give us that aerial photography which will complement the stuff we get from the ground.
Everybody knows that there's lots of hunts all over the United Kingdom flouting the legislation about fox hunting. So it's open secret, everybody knows. Now we have the capability to, in support of the League's work, show that to everybody in the country. How are they going to react? How are the huntsmen going to react? Badly, I suspect.
For building up a case, we have to show the illegal hunting, and it's the intention to hunt as well. So the more evidence we get, the easier it is. So that's where this aerial intelligence could be quite helpful in that sense. But it won't replace; it can complement and strengthen the existing cases we take forward.
I've just filmed the start of the fox hunt and directed our pilot. We can get a great deal of potential intelligence for a very low cost over a very wide area. That's useful in all sorts of conservation missions, whether it's chasing fox hunters or whether it's monitoring logging in the Amazon rainforest.
I think we're almost done. Anyway, I'm going to just move on because I think you get the point. I mean, the point being is that people are now using this to, follow the hunters. Yes. Okay, that's perfect. So I want to just kind of, as I get closer, I'm going to talk about maybe one of the controversial areas that we have to deal with, the emergency medical services, the police, and other people using this technology. As I said at the beginning, when the state starts to use it, you have to be aware that other citizens should have access to this technology, in my opinion. But we've also got to recognize that for police and for other emergency services, this technology is extremely, extremely helpful. Most recently, I want to talk about what happened. It was in Saskatchewan. Probably you may have heard about this story. There was a man in a car crash, and this was in the winter here in Canada, so we know what that's like, who was injured, and he left the car, staggered out into the forest, and was essentially lost. They actually called in a full-size helicopter to try and find him. Full-size helicopter couldn't find him. At this point, it was late at night. They knew it was a problem, and they knew he was out there, but they just couldn't find him. So they called in their Dragonfly drone, which is a system about that size. It's actually maybe even a little smaller than my system there, which had a FLIR camera on it, FLIR being the infrared system. And using that system, they located him. And I'm going to show, again, I think videos hopefully will speak a little louder than my words. it shows you what you can do with this technology. And here's a video of them actually finding this man using heat sources, using the Dragonflyer. And I have to say my drone is a lot smoother than the Dragonflyer. So this explains what they did. They pinged his cell phone, and then using the drone, they actually located him. And that little white speck was him. And this is all relayed down to the ground. The operators on the ground could then direct the police to him. So the Dragonflyer, as I say, it's essentially not much different from that. This saves somebody's life. If there can't be an application for good, I think that's probably the ultimate application for good at this point. Formative times, again, formative times with this technology, but I think it's very important to understand that this technology has so much power, and so much power for good, that I am strongly an advocate of getting this technology out there as quickly as we can and into the hands of trained people who know how to use it, know the rules and know the regulations, and can operate them safely. So there's a guy out there who simply could have died in the cold because of that. So that's kind of about where I want to talk about. I mean, there's the future. I can talk about so many other applications for good, and the future really is an endless possibility of human invention. And hopefully we've taken so many other pieces of technology and made them better, and made them, our cell phones hopefully can be used for good, our every piece of technology for good. I'll end up with probably one of the most important uses for good, and that's the pizza delivery drone, which is, it's gonna, trust me, this won't happen. The thought of this happening would be kind of funny, but you know, this is the pizza delivery drone. So you may have seen this video. It went down. Oops. Essentially, there we go. So the pizza delivery drone, it's a marketing tool, nothing more. You're not going to see your pizzas delivered by drone. Trust me, it's not going to happen. But it is another marketing tool for this kind of technology. And it would be kind of neat, I have to say. It's like the beer delivery drone. So I think you've got to look at where we can go with this technology. We can kind of go anywhere that, again, human imagination can take us. The biggest holdup for good is the regulations. And I think understanding the safety and operation of these drones is the biggest concern I would have. The privacy issues, I think we'll get into, and I'm really interested in hearing some of the speakers talk about it. I think those kind of issues, for a lot of these things I've shown you today, are not front and center. They're not about that. But I think there are some issues that we have to discuss, and I'm really kind of glad to be part of this meeting to discuss them. So I guess we have questions now. No questions? We'll go in the other room? Sure.